This is the UARKFCA Timeout, the podcast where coaches and athletes share what God has done and is continuing to do in their lives. Welcome back to the podcast today. Abel Sanchez in the studio. Excited to talk to you today because we had your daughter in here not too long ago. So I don't think these episodes are going to build upon one another, but I would definitely encourage anybody to go back and check hers out as well. Abel, tell us about yourself. Tell us who you are, what do you do, and when did you start following Jesus for the first time?
So I am Abel Sanchez. I am the head diving coach here at Arkansas. And what was the question?
Well, who you are. I guess that's what you do.
Yep.
And when did you start following Jesus for the first time?
Well, so I grew up in a Christian home. My father was a pastor. And so I grew up in Michigan and in Holland, Michigan. So any of you know where that is. It's a small little town out here. And I grew up in a church. And even though I grew up in a Christian household, I didn't really accept Christ until the summer between my third and fourth grade year. And we had a pretty special youth group. Youth group was it was vibrant, and we loved a bunch of guys and girls, but we loved sport, and so we would play volleyball. We would call it, I don't know, ghetto ball. I don't know what we called it. But there was a lot of contact in volleyball. Anyway, it was a lot of fun. And through those, our meetings, I came to really follow Christ.
That was between third and fourth grade.
Correct.
Okay. And so you said Holland, Michigan. I know you... If you're watching on YouTube, I know that you could see the hand go up, and you said that. I guess that's somewhere west Michigan.
On the west side, yep.
Okay, small little town over there. So then you have that experience through this community, through this youth group community. What changed after that? What did the rest of junior high school, and the rest of it look like? And I know that you competed. You were a diver at University of Michigan.
Correct.
So kind of what did this change to surrendering and following Jesus? How did that impact the rest of the way?
That's a long story.
Well, maybe we got time for a little bit of it.
Yeah. We'll get into bits and pieces. I would say up until that point, I was a very wild child. I didn't get into drugs and drinking, but I was definitely into being mischievous and just being, just crazy. And it definitely, I was able to not change, but I was able to channel that focus into something else, something more creative, more constructive. And so it definitely took on something I didn't know would be. So my father passes away when I'm 14, so a couple of years later. And if I don't think if I would have found Christ at a young age, I would have gone off the rails. And so having that for a couple of years, and then when that happened, I knew where I was, where I stood, and I knew I had God with me at all times. And so going to college, I was the kid that didn't drink, the kid that barely knew any secular music. I was the brunt of many jokes. But it was fine. I didn't mind it. And so it got to a point to where every weekend my roommates, they would try to throw a party, or they would have a party, and it was like, come on, you got to drink. And it got to a point where I'm like, no, no. And so to this day, I don't drink, and, but I haven't, I don't think I've lost anything. But But I do have friends or people today, they'll be like, hey, let's go out. Do you want to go to and get a beer? And I'm like, you know what? I don't really drink, but yeah, let's go. And they're like, well, you know, maybe we'll catch up on something else.
Yeah.
Which is fine. And then college wasn't easy. College was tough. College was lonely. College was challenging. I enjoyed the challenge. I just knew, I think from a very, very young age, where I was in God's plan. I knew that I was in his plan, but I never knew what the plan was, and I still don't know the plan. And I keep asking, what's the plan? And I think the plan is that I just keep going and keep asking, what's the plan? Because, I don't know, maybe that's God's way of just keeping us going. I don't really know. But I know that there have been many, many instances in my life where I ask God, why me? Like, why did you preserve me? Why have you been so good to me? And I am so unworthy, but extremely grateful. And so, so that one day, I think was a plan, definitely a plan, and a day that God knew, and it was definitely a special day.
Well, good. So when I think you said you had some of these convictions that, yeah, you had your mischievous side, but you didn't ever, you weren't necessarily tempted by some of the other things. Was that just a Holy Spirit saying like, hey, you don't need that, or kind of what do you think? What do you think that? Or you just think you're wired differently, or what do you think that it's just God's grace? Like, what do you think that was?
I mean, as I was older,
as you kind of progress through, you have the temptations of life come, right? And you've kind of been, you said God's preserved you and he's protected you from those things. What do you think is attributed to this? Is it just Spirit moving, or what do you think?
That's a great question. I think it definitely is God, for sure. What is it? I keep asking that question, like, why me? I don't know. I just have, maybe I'm wired. I've seen in my own experiences as a child and growing up, you know, people on the streets. I've seen, my dad once took us, so my dad was very interesting, but he once took us and we would drive by Skid Row, not in Skid Row, but we were in Chicago, and there were a bunch of homeless people and they were passed out, whatever. And he's like, you drink, you do alcohol, you do drugs, this is where you're going to end up. I'm like, what? And so I don't know if that was it, but it definitely made an impression.
Yeah. Do you remember how old you were when that day?
Oh, man. Well, before 14.
Yeah.
So, no, I don't.
It's amazing how sometimes, like, almost those passing moments like that can have such a deep impact on how we end up being shaped.
Yeah.
You know? And you know, I don't know if there was maybe that with your dad, you know, I don't know if that was the most tactful or gentle way to do that, but it left the impression that it protected you from maybe succumbing to some of those temptations in your life. So I guess mission accomplished.
Yeah.
On one hand. So you go through college, you say it's a little bit lonely, you say it's difficult. So tell me what role that, you know, you have your faith, right? Your faith is what's defining you, not all these other things. How did that help you in that? You mentioned there was a community in 3rd and 4th grade. Did you ever find something like that in college and beyond?
Great question. My freshman year, I was just floating around, and then I went to this one church. After going to church for so long, you just kind of revert to what you know. So I go to church, and the pastor was this amazing old Jewish man who he was a Christian Jewish. He called himself a complete Jew. It was awesome. And so he's like, can I come over and visit? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So he comes over one night, and he's like, who do you talk to? Who do you, like, do community with? Do you have a Bible study? I go, no, it's just me. And he's like, I'm going to get you in contact with this one guy. And this guy was Bruce Dishnow. And he was starting up a AIA, Athletes in Action, chapter in Michigan. And there was nothing. There was no FCA. There may have been. I don't know. But it wasn't big like this is. And so so he got 5 guys. I was one of the 5. And we started this chapter in Michigan. And they tell me, I don't know, but they tell me there are, I don't know, 50, 100 kids. I don't know. There are a lot. And it's just amazing how God took this guy and 5 other guys and started this. And I feel really bad because there were 5 of us, and I have not been a great I should have kept in touch more often. But life keeps going. Life doesn't stop. And but because of Bruce, there was this community, and he would have Bible studies with us. And so what you guys do is invaluable. Like what you do is so amazing. Words could not really describe, other than just to let you know that if it wasn't for Bruce, I'd be lost. It would have been really difficult. I met with him once a week, and those were sometimes I didn't want to see him because I didn't really read my chapter or my Bible verse, but I am so grateful that I met him every week. And he would find me. He would look me out. He's like, "Where are you? You need to come. You need to meet me." We didn't have cell phones then, so it was a lot easier.
A lot easier to hide from somebody.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you know what's funny? Even though we didn't have cell phones, we didn't hide from people. We showed up. You know what I mean? Even though I didn't get my stuff done all the time, I showed up. I was like, yeah, I didn't do it again this week. But anyway.
Well, if anything, a cell phone is a way for me to send a last-second message to say, I'm not going to be there. You know?
Yep.
As opposed to, I have to, I told him I would be there. I have no way to, that makes a little bit of sense then. Okay, so you in college, you find this community. First of all, you had a Bruce. You had somebody that was, I guess he was a little older than you.
Yep.
A little older than you that was pouring into you. He took you under his wing, and he saw something in you and said, so much so that he was willing to push you. You need to show up here. You need to show up here. And I guess as an athlete, you respond well to something like that, right?
Of course.
But then you also had a community of peers also. I don't know if you mentioned it. They weren't. It's not like these were. It wasn't just like 5 other divers.
No,
this was other sports.
So one was the captain of the baseball team. One was captain of the baseball team. One was a runner. One was the running back at Michigan. I was a diver, and then we had runner, football, 2 football players.
Okay, so it's 2 football.
Yeah.
So that group, pretty diverse group from an athletic perspective. I guess it was all guys.
Yep.
Though pretty diverse group from an athletic perspective, came together under this kind of the unity of we're here to talk about Jesus together. And what did that do? You said it was difficult. College was challenging. You came in maybe feeling a little bit alone. When you find that community, I mean,
it was awesome.
It seems like I feel like I'm baiting an obvious answer here, but what does that do for you?
Man, you can be yourself. You can let your guard down. And because I loved my teammates. I love them to this day. But I felt every weekend, every night after practice, I had to put up a guard. You know, I couldn't just be but then with my AIA guys, I could just be me.
The walls could come down a little bit.
Yep.
That's good, man. So when the diving career goes on, and you, I see if you're watching on YouTube, you may have seen on the right hand there, you got the Olympic rings. So do we have an Olympic story that we're willing to?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've been very blessed. In 2000, so I continued to train. I moved to the Woodlands, Texas, and I trained there for a few years, and ended up in Florida afterwards. And I was blessed and lucky enough to go to Sydney 2000, compete in the Olympic Games. And so I have dual citizenship with Peru. And so I represented one of my coaches once said, dude, you need to represent Peru. And I was like, no, I'm going to represent the U.S. So that was in 96. And then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. No, it was in 92. And then in 96, I was like, well, maybe I'm going to try this Peru thing. Maybe not. And so that took a couple years to get squared away. So then I finally got my dual citizenship. And then the year, so you have to qualify. You don't just go to the Olympic Games. You have to qualify to go to the Olympic Games, or your country needs to qualify. And then, like here in the U.S., if we qualify 2 spots, those 2 spots will go to Olympic trials, and then everyone fights for those 2 spots. Normally, everywhere else, because the pool is so small, no pun intended, whoever earns that spot, you typically will take that spot to the Olympic Games. And so in Peru, I earned the spot. I go. But that was, that was, so Peru, the governing body, they're like, well, you have to do so well. First earn a spot, then you have to do so well internationally. And I'm like, okay, well, what meets? They told me what meets. I met that goal. And then they're like, well, you have to go to this other meet and be top 12. And so I go to that meet, and I'm top 12. And they're like, well, we don't know yet. And so, I mean, we're getting down to the games were later because they were in Australia. I believe they were in August. And so it was June. And there was a meet in Fort Lauderdale, and they're like, yeah, you need to be top 8 or something. And I'm like, they were trying to squeeze me. And so I'm like, okay. So I go, and I just had the meet of my life. It was awesome. It was great. I was 4th going into finals. I dropped down maybe to 7th, 8th, so I made it. And then, so then finally, after whatever they had to decide, they would allow me to go.
Oh, they allowed you to go.
They allowed me to go. Yeah. And so, this whole time I'm paying my way to international meets. I have 3 jobs just to make ends meet. And all those in Olympic sports, they understand. We're working just to make ends meet. So, but it was worth it. I loved it. And I don't think I'd change anything.
It's amazing. In Sydney? Was it nice
Sydney,
in August?
Oh, it was beautiful.
That's
absolutely
awesome.
Beautiful.
That's awesome. So then at some point you transitioned from diving to diving coach. When did that happen?
So then I come back. I did not want to go into coaching. So I worked for the county of LA. That was, I was in an 8x8 cubicle, and I had to wear a tie and pants and a shirt, and I was used to shorts and flip-flops, and that was about it. And so that took a lot of getting used to. But then I knew there was more. There was more out there. I was in an 8x8. I stared at a wall. I'm like, what am I doing? And I had a friend, and he's like, well, you can come and work for the soccer company with me. And so I go and I work for this soccer company. That was a lot of fun. And then I started moonlighting part-time coaching. And then one coach quit, left. So they're like, hey, we have an open spot. You want to coach? I'm like, all right, sure. So I stopped the soccer. I go coach. And then I meet my wife. And then we're like, okay, let's see what I do. After that, I applied to get my master's in architecture. I got into school. We were ready to be done, and then my wife is pregnant. And I'm like, whoa. All right. So literally the day I sat down to look for a job online, New Mexico calls me. And so New Mexico's like, the day, it's a Saturday. And so they're like, would you like to come on out and work? And I'm like, what do you New Mexico? where the heck is New Mexico? So anyway, we end up going to New Mexico.
And that was that Breezy that she was pregnant?
That was Breezy in 2004. Yep.
You know, I think I remember her saying, she's like, I was so close to being born in California.
Very close.
And ended up being born in New Mexico.
That's hilarious. If someone watches that and then this, they'll be like, oh.
That's funny. So you start your career at New Mexico.
Yep.
And you were around a little bit. I know you went to New Mexico. You went across the country, right, to UNC.
Yep.
Then you went north of the border
into
Canada for a little bit. And then eventually you came down to Arkansas. And maybe, I mean, there's probably really good stories to tell at all of those places. And it may be a reason for a part 2 with you later down the road. But I want to get us here. You're here at Arkansas now.
Yes.
And you've just finished up a couple of years now, right? 2, 3,
third year.
Third year. You finished up your third year. Man, tell me in all of that, and maybe even just in the last 3 years here, what has God been teaching you?
Patience, and to really lean on Him. And so one of the first verses that Bruce made me memorize was 1 Peter 5, 6, and 7. Humble yourself, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, that He may exalt you at the proper time, casting all your anxieties upon Him because He cares for you. And I was like, what does that mean? Well, that means everything now. It's all in His timing, and He does care for us. And now I know if I just cast my cares on God, I know He'll take care of me.
That's so good. And I love that you said you equate that to the patience, because I hear you say in that verse, at the proper time. Right? And I think that one of the things that we will do sometimes, we'll say, okay, God, I casted all my anxieties on you. Can we get to the next thing? Can we get to the good part now? And He's like, in the proper time, we'll get there, and that's such a critical part of developing us and sanctifying us. So you've learned patience over the last few. You probably got a lifetime of patience that you've learned, which has to just come with being a coach and working in the world of athletics. But what is a way? This is a kind of a weird question, but what is a way that you can practice patience that you have?
Practice patience. Wow, no one's ever asked that.
It feels like it just kind of happens to you, doesn't it?
It does happen. I think just life brings these challenges, and I think one way to maybe practice is to practice slowing down, practice praying, practice. It's really hard. Quiet time. I grew up in a Latin family, and there was never quiet time. And then I met my wife, and one of the first times we go out on a date, it wasn't a date. No, we for the first year we were just friends, and we go to Santa Barbara. We're in the car, and I'm used to either music being on, talking. There's always music. There's always sound. And she didn't have the radio. The music wasn't on. The radio wasn't on. We didn't have a CD in. CDs, yes, CDs. And I was just sitting there, and I was like, whoa, it's really quiet, So I think she taught me how to be quiet, which was important.
Well, I think that's really, we slow down. I mean, and I feel like I don't want to misinterpret this, but sometimes that means literally, physically drive slower, walk slower, right? Slow yourself down and move at a normal pace, right? We don't have to sprint everywhere that we go. 2, we pray, which is requires maybe some level of quiet, or at least communication with God. It requires us to shut off the things around us so that we can focus on the one we're talking to. But even just sitting in the quiet, right? That's to me, that's 3 really easy things that I'm glad to hear you're doing, that I think anybody listening to this could practice those things as well. Abel, thank you so much, man, for jumping in here with me today. I always love when we get a coach in the studio. I think we need more coaches in here, and more coaches that are willing to testify to what God has done in their life, especially in the world of college athletics. So thank you so much for being in here today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to this episode of UARKFCA Timeout. If you enjoyed the story, learned something new, or both, consider subscribing and sharing this episode with a friend. You can follow us online at UARKFCA, and always remember to take the time out to recognize that you have a powerful story too.